I sent my wedding invitations out first. 3 weeks later, my younger sister planned her lavish engagement party on the exact same day. She told me I was socially unfit for her new high society life. Not a single member of my family came to my wedding. But while I was cutting my wedding cake, my father frantically texted me, "What did you do?" I simply smiled and typed my reply. The moment he opened my message, his fake upper-class world shattered. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against a toxic family who underestimated your worth. I stood in the breathtaking sanctuary of the historic downtown basilica, listening to the soft echoes of a string quartet playing in the background. The stained glass windows cast warm, colorful light across the marble floors, illuminating the thousands of white orchids I had meticulously chosen for my wedding day. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was 32 years old, marrying a brilliant, warm-hearted neurosurgeon named David. Yet, as I stood at the altar in my custom silk gown, my eyes were glued to the left side of the aisle. The first 6 rows, the pews explicitly reserved for the bride's family, were completely empty. Not a single aunt, uncle, or cousin was sitting there. My parents, Marcus and Vivian Jenkins, were conspicuously absent. My younger sister Chloe was nowhere to be found. The mahogany benches sat bare, a glaring, silent monument to 32 years of being the family scapegoat. David squeezed my hands. His palms were warm and grounding. He looked down at me, his dark eyes filled with a fierce, protective love. He leaned in, his voice a low, soothing rumble over the music. "They really did it," he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "I cannot believe your mother actually pulled this off." I forced a steady breath, refusing to let a single tear ruin my makeup. "Oh, I can," I replied, my voice steady. Vivian Jenkins never makes an empty threat. When she wants to make a point, she makes sure the whole congregation knows about it. Through the simple action of standing at the altar, the brutal reality of the past few weeks washed over me. Just a month ago, the moment my wedding invitations hit the mail, Chloe miraculously got engaged to Preston Sterling. Preston was 32, white, and allegedly the heir to a massive old money fortune. He lived in a sprawling mansion in the wealthiest zip code in the state. To my parents, Preston was not just a future son-in-law. He was their golden ticket into elite society. My father, who was deeply obsessed with his status on the church deacon board, and my mother, who treated her country club waitlist like a religion, saw Preston as their ultimate achievement. When Chloe deliberately scheduled her engagement party for the exact same Saturday at the exact same time as my wedding, I thought it was just another one of her petty competitive games. I called my parents, expecting them to talk some sense into her. Instead, my father had snatched the phone from my mother and delivered a verbal blow that still echoed in my mind. He told me that my wedding at some downtown venue could be easily rescheduled. He said Preston was a Sterling, and the family's reputation at the church depended on this engagement party. If I did not change my wedding date, they would not come. Worse than that, my mother had spent the last 3 weeks working the phones. She systematically called every aunt, uncle, and church elder, effectively banning them from attending my wedding. She framed it as a family loyalty test. Anyone who went to my wedding would be cut off and uninvited from the event of the century at the Sterling estate. For a family absolutely addicted to appearances, the choice was easy. They chose the mansion. David gently brushed his thumb across my knuckles, pulling me back to the present. "You know my family is your family now, right?" he said, nodding toward the right side of the aisle. His side was packed. His parents, his siblings, his colleagues from the hospital, and my own tight-knit circle of friends filled the pews. They were looking at us with genuine joy. "I know," I whispered, smiling up at him, "and I would not trade the people in this room for anything. Let them have their country club masquerade. I am marrying the best man I know." The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. I did not shed a single tear for the empty seats. I spoke my vows with clarity and conviction. When David kissed me, the sanctuary erupted in cheers from the people who actually showed up to love and support us. I walked back down the aisle with my head held high. I was not the tragic, discarded daughter they desperately wanted me to be. I was Maya Jenkins, and I knew exactly what was coming. The reception was held at a stunning rooftop venue overlooking the city skyline. The energy was electric. David's family embraced me with open arms, completely ignoring the glaring absence of my blood relatives. The food was spectacular, the music kept the dance floor packed, and for a few hours I allowed myself to just be a joyful bride. But I kept my phone tucked discreetly in a hidden pocket of my gown. I knew my family. I knew their need to boast, to rub their supposed superiority in my face. It happened right as the venue staff rolled out our 4-tier wedding cake. The DJ announced for everyone to gather around. David wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, as the photographer snapped pictures. Just as I picked up the silver cake knife, I felt my phone vibrate against my thigh. Then it vibrated again. And again. I slipped my free hand into my pocket and pulled out the phone. My lock screen was flooded with notifications from the family group chat. My mother had been sending photos non-stop. There were blurry, chaotic pictures of Chloe standing in the grand foyer of the Sterling mansion, wearing a designer dress she could not afford. There were photos of my parents holding champagne flutes, trying desperately to look natural, next to Preston's stiff, unwelcoming parents. The microaggressions in the photos were almost palpable. Preston's family looked at mine like they were an amusing charity project, but my parents were too blinded by the chandeliers to notice. Then came the direct message from my father. It was a photo of him and Chloe standing in front of the sweeping marble staircase of the mansion. The caption read, "This is what real success looks like, Maya. We are mingling with the elite. It is a shame you chose to be so stubborn and selfish. You could have been part of this if you were not so socially unfit for this lifestyle." I read the message twice. Socially unfit. That was the exact phrase Chloe had used when she texted me 2 weeks ago to gloat about her engagement venue. She told me I did not have the class to walk into the Sterling estate. She told me my little business projects were an embarrassment compared to Preston's generational wealth. They all thought I was just some struggling entrepreneur who dropped out of medical school to pursue a pipe dream. They constantly mocked my quiet lifestyle, assuming my lack of designer labels meant I was broke. What none of them knew, what I had kept fiercely private for the last 5 years, was the true nature of my business. I was the founder and chief executive officer of Obsidian Holdings, a highly aggressive private equity firm specializing in distressed real estate and debt acquisition. I did not just work in finance. I devoured failing companies for breakfast. David leaned over my shoulder, catching a glimpse of the text message. His jaw tightened. "Do you want me to take the phone?" he asked quietly. "Let us just enjoy our cake, Maya. Do not let them steal this moment." I turned my head and kissed his cheek. "They are not stealing anything, baby," I said, a slow, icy smile spreading across my face. "In fact, I think it is time I finally sent my wedding gift to the happy couple." I unlocked my phone. I did not write a long emotional paragraph. I did not tell my father how much his absence hurt or how cruel his words were. Emotional reactions were exactly what they wanted. Instead, I tapped out a very simple, direct reply to the group chat. "I hope you are enjoying the architecture, Dad. I highly recommend taking a good look at the crown molding in the grand dining room. It is my favorite part of the property. Oh, and please tell Preston to check his email immediately." I hit send, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and turned my full attention back to my husband. We cut the cake, the crowd cheered, and we fed each other the first slice. It was sweet, but not nearly as sweet as the impending reality I had just set into motion. Less than 5 minutes later, right as the DJ started playing our song for the first dance, my phone began to vibrate violently. It was a continuous, frantic buzzing. I did not need to look at the screen to know what was happening. My father was calling. When I did not answer, the text messages started pouring in. "Maya, what is this? What did you just do? Preston is freaking out. Answer your phone right now." I let the phone buzz. I rested my hands on David's shoulders, swaying to the music, letting the soft lights of the rooftop wash over us. I knew exactly what was happening miles away at that lavish estate. I knew because I was the one who had orchestrated it. For months, my parents had bragged about Preston's vast fortune, ignoring every red flag, ignoring his condescending attitude, ignoring the fact that he never actually paid for anything up front. They did not know that the Sterling family had quietly gone bankrupt 2 years ago. They did not know that the mansion was heavily mortgaged, the taxes were unpaid, and the estate was in the final stages of foreclosure. And most importantly, they had absolutely no idea that last week, Obsidian Holdings had purchased that debt in a private commercial portfolio sale. I owned the mortgage, I owned the property, I owned the very floor they were standing on to mock me. My phone lit up again. It was a message from Chloe this time. Maya, please. The caterers are screaming at Preston. His credit cards just declined. What did you email him? I pulled away from David just enough to read the screen. I smiled a genuine radiant smile and looked up at the stars. The wedding was perfect and the reception was just getting started. The music swelled around us on the rooftop, the bass vibrating through the wooden floorboards as David spun me around. His deep laughter mingled with the cheers of our friends, and I let myself be swept up completely in the rhythm of the moment. My phone remained securely tucked away in the hidden pocket of my gown, though I could feel it vibrating frantically against my leg. A continuous, desperate buzzing. I knew exactly what was happening at that sprawling estate across town, and the realization was sweeter than the vanilla buttercream we had just eaten. To understand the absolute perfection of this moment, you have to understand what happened exactly 2 weeks ago. I was sitting in my downtown office reviewing quarterly acquisition reports when my phone screen lit up with a massive paragraph from Chloe. It was not an apology for stealing my wedding date. It was not a polite excuse or a request for understanding. It was a vicious, calculated attempt to put me in my place. Look, Maya, she had written. Let us just be honest for once. Julian comes from a completely different world. His family is high society. They host charity galas, they sit on museum boards, and they actually have a pedigree. Mom and Dad agree that having you there would just be awkward for everyone. You are entirely too blunt, you have zero sense of refinement, and frankly, you are socially unfit for this kind of lifestyle. Please do not try to crash the party or make a scene. It is best for the family image if you just stay away. Socially unfit. The words had burned my eyes as I read them. My mother Vivian had spent my entire life acting like I was a feral street dog because I refused to play the quiet, obedient church girl role she had scripted for me. When I walked away from medical school to start my own business, she told her country club friends I was going through a confused phase. She worshipped the ground Julian walked on simply because he was white, drove a vintage luxury car, and tossed around trust fund terminology. To Vivian and Marcus, Julian was the ultimate prize. He was the glittering trophy that proved they had finally arrived in the upper echelons of society. They were so blinded by the illusion of old money that they never bothered to look at the actual ledger. But I look at ledgers for a living. I did not cry when I read Chloe's text. I did not throw my phone across the room or call my father to beg for an invitation to an event I never wanted to attend in the first place. Instead, I picked up my office line and called my chief financial officer. My family thought I ran a struggling little consulting firm out of a shared workspace. They assumed I was barely scraping by because I did not wear ostentatious designer logos or lease luxury cars I could not afford. The truth was violently different. I am the sole owner and chief executive officer of Obsidian Holdings. We are a highly aggressive private equity firm that specializes in acquiring distressed debt, liquidating bankrupt portfolios, and foreclosing on over-leveraged commercial and residential real estate. I do not just make a comfortable living, I control billions of dollars in assets. I instructed my team to do a deep forensic dive into the Sterling family trust. If Chloe was going to ban me from her engagement party because my presence would tarnish their elite aesthetic, I wanted to know exactly what kind of aesthetic I was missing. It took my analysts less than 4 hours to bring me the truth. The legendary Sterling fortune did not exist. It was a ghost. It was a fragile house of cards built on generations of terrible investments, unpaid taxes, and massive commercial loan defaults. Julian's father had been borrowing against the family name for a decade. Their primary holding company had filed for bankruptcy protection 2 years prior. They were completely insolvent. And that magnificent, sprawling, historic mansion where Chloe was currently hosting her high society engagement party. It was 90 days past due on a $5 million balloon payment. The bank was quietly preparing to seize the property and put it up for public auction. Julian and his family were desperate. They were playing the part of the wealthy elite to convince my father, a prominent pastor with direct access to massive church building funds, to essentially bail them out. They were using my parents' desperate need for social validation to orchestrate a massive financial scam. When my chief financial officer laid the documents on my desk, I felt a predatory calm wash over me. I did not just sit back and let the bank take the property. I authorized Obsidian Holdings to purchase the sterling debt portfolio in its entirety. I wired the funds directly to the lending institution. I bought the promissory notes, I bought the defaulted commercial loans, and I bought the deed to the mansion. I became the sole legal owner of the Sterling estate. I literally owned the marble floors my sister was standing on to call me socially unfit. The memory of signing those acquisition papers brought a sharp, satisfied smile to my face as David spun me back into his chest on the dance floor. The song slowly faded out, and the crowd of our genuine, loving friends erupted into applause. I reached into my pocket again. The family group chat was a war zone of incoming messages. Chloe was demanding to know why the caterers were packing up the food stations. Marcus was typing in all capital letters demanding I answer the phone immediately. I took a slow breath, enjoying the cool evening breeze coming off the city skyline. I opened the group chat, tapped the text box, and typed the exact words I had been saving for this very moment. I told you to check the crown molding, Dad, but while you are at it, tell Julian to check his bank accounts. His credit line is officially frozen. Oh, and you might want to look out the front windows. Tell the guests to clear the driveway. The authorities are at the front gates of the estate, and they are not there to deliver wedding gifts. I hit send, locked the screen, and tossed the phone onto a nearby table. Let them drown in the reality they created. David watched me with a mixture of awe and absolute adoration. He knew exactly what it took for me to reach this point. He had held me through countless nights when my parents canceled plans to visit us, claiming they had to attend some arbitrary country club mixer with Chloe and Preston. He had seen the tears I refused to shed when my mother returned my Christmas gifts, because they were not from a high-end boutique. David pulled me into his chest, his heartbeat steady against mine, offering a safe harbor I had never found in my own bloodline. The rooftop was alive with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter from our chosen family. My phone, however, vibrated so violently against the wooden table that it began to slowly inch toward the edge. I picked up the device and unlocked the screen. The family group chat had gone completely silent. Instead, my father was messaging me directly. The text read, "What the hell are you talking about? Preston is a billionaire. You are letting your petty jealousy ruin your sister's perfect night. Fix whatever sick joke you are playing right now." I stared at the words, a cold clinical detachment settling over me. My father, Reverend Marcus Jenkins, was a man who commanded a congregation of 3,000 people every Sunday. He preached about integrity, humility, and the dangers of greed. Yet behind the pulpit, he was a man entirely consumed by his own insecurity. He wanted the prestige of an elite lifestyle so badly that he was willing to sacrifice his own daughter to get it. I took a deep breath, my thumbs moving swiftly across the glass screen. I replied, "A billionaire does not use his future father-in-law's church pension fund as collateral to secure a fraudulent bridge loan, Dad." I watched the typing indicator bubble pop up on his end, then disappear, then pop up again. The sheer panic radiating through the digital space was palpable. The truth about Preston Sterling was not just that he was broke. It was much darker and far more insidious. When my analysts at Obsidian Holdings began tearing apart the Sterling family's financial records, we did not just find unpaid property taxes and maxed-out credit lines. We found a glaring, highly illegal anomaly buried deep in Preston's corporate filings. Preston was not a trust fund baby. He was a parasite wearing a tailored suit. He had targeted Chloe specifically because he knew who our father was. He knew Marcus Jenkins sat on the board of a massive community development fund, holding the keys to millions of dollars in church donations and pension savings. Preston played the part of the devout, respectful future son-in-law flawlessly. He charmed my father on the golf course. He brought my mother expensive, albeit heavily discounted, bottles of wine. He convinced them that his family's temporary liquidity issue was just a minor hurdle in releasing a massive offshore trust. Preston had convinced my father to secretly pledge $2 million of the church's development fund as a guarantee for his failing commercial investments. My father, blinded by the proximity to whiteness and supposed old money, actually signed the papers. He thought he was securing his family a seat at the billionaire's table. He thought he was playing the elite society game. Instead, he was committing wire fraud and embezzlement to impress a man who secretly despised him and everything he stood for. My phone lit up with an incoming call. It was my father. I swiped to answer and pressed the phone to my ear, walking toward the quieter edge of the rooftop terrace. David followed closely behind his hand, resting reassuringly on the small of my back. "Maya, what did you do?" My father's voice cracked through the speaker. He was practically hyperventilating, struggling to be heard over the sound of the classical string quartet playing in the background of the mansion. "Tell me you did not do anything to Preston's accounts. The caterers are threatening to walk out. His cards are bouncing." "I did not do anything to his accounts, Dad," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm and even. "The federal government did. His accounts have been frozen for weeks. I simply bought the debt he defaulted on. I own the mortgage to the Sterling estate. The bank was going to seize the property on Monday anyway. I just expedited the paperwork." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "The church money," my father stammered, panic stripping away his usual commanding tone. "Preston said the church money was perfectly safe. It was just a temporary holding measure to bypass a tax loophole. He promised me the funds would be released back into the church accounts before the quarterly audit next month." "He lied to you," I replied, staring out at the glittering lights of the city below. "He used your congregation's money to pay off his personal gambling debts and to keep the lights on in that ridiculous mansion. He is completely broke. And because you signed those commercial pledge agreements without running them by a real attorney, you are personally on the hook for $2 million. The silence on the line was deafening. I could hear the faint sound of my mother Vivian in the background, her voice shrill and panicked, as she asked my father what was wrong. My mother was the architect of this entire disaster. She was the one who pushed Chloe to drop her own career ambitions to cater to Preston. She was the one who told me I was socially unfit because I refused to straighten my hair, change my vocabulary, and shrink myself to make insecure wealthy people comfortable. She worshipped the illusion of upper-class perfection so blindly that she walked her entire family right off a financial cliff. "You sold us out!" My father finally whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "You bought his debt just to destroy your sister's engagement. You did this out of spite." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that startled a nearby waiter. "Spite has nothing to do with it, Dad. It is strictly business. You and Mom spent my entire life treating me like a liability because I did not fit your country club mold. You called me a failure when I quit medical school to start my firm. You literally banned our entire family from attending my wedding today so you could go sip cheap champagne in a foreclosed house. I did not destroy you. Your own greed did. I just refused to fund the rescue mission." Before he could respond, a specialized notification popped up on my phone screen, interrupting the call screen. Because Obsidian Holdings was now the legal owner of the Sterling estate, my security team had taken over the property's digital infrastructure earlier that afternoon. I had full access to the exterior camera feeds. I tapped the notification, bringing up a crisp, high-definition live video feed of the massive wrought iron gates at the front of the Sterling property. The visual was poetic. Red and blue lights flashed aggressively against the dark, manicured hedges. 4 marked police cruisers and a dark sport utility vehicle had just pulled up to the gates. Uniformed officers were stepping out of their vehicles, approaching the security keypad. The local sheriff's department had arrived and they were armed with the official eviction notice, the foreclosure documentation, and a warrant for wire fraud. "Dad," I said softly, my eyes glued to the live feed on my screen. "I strongly suggest you and Mom find the nearest side exit. You might want to leave the champagne glasses behind." "What are you talking about?" he demanded, the panic returning in full force. "Look out the front windows of the grand ballroom," I advised, feeling a profound sense of closure wash over me. "The sheriff is at the gate, and unlike your country club friends, they do not care about your place on the guest list. Happy engagement day to Chloe." I ended the call without waiting for a response. I turned off my phone completely and slid it into David's suit jacket pocket. I looked up at my husband, the man who loved me exactly as I was, without conditions and without pretense. The toxic cycle of my family's approval-seeking was permanently broken. I took David's hand, smiled brightly, and let him lead me back to the center of the dance floor. Our new life was waiting, and it was entirely ours. David and I swayed to the music for exactly one song before my curiosity demanded satisfaction. I stepped back to our sweetheart table, David walking close beside me, and reached into my bridal clutch for my iPad. I propped it up against a towering arrangement of white orchids and tapped the Instagram icon. Chloe had been broadcasting her entire high society charade for the last 3 hours, determined to prove to her followers and to me that she had secured the ultimate victory. I clicked her glowing profile picture, and the screen instantly filled with her face. She was holding a crystal champagne flute, grinning manically into the front-facing camera. The connection was crisp, broadcasting the opulence of the Sterling mansion in high definition. "We are living the absolute dream tonight," Chloe cooed to her viewers, adjusting the neckline of her overly embellished designer gown. Behind her, the grand ballroom was packed with people who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. The aesthetic was desperately trying to scream old money, but through the sharp lens of the camera, I could see the cracks in the facade. The heavy velvet drapes in the background looked dusty, and the famous gold leaf trim on the ceiling was visibly peeling in the corners. The Sterling family had not been able to afford basic maintenance in years. "Look who is here!" Chloe squealed, spinning the camera around to capture our mother. Vivian stepped into the frame, practically vibrating with a desperate need to be perceived as wealthy. She had linked her arm through the arm of Eleanor Sterling Preston's mother. Eleanor looked like she was actively holding her breath to avoid catching a disease. Her posture was rigid, her smile thin and utterly devoid of warmth. "Oh, we are just having the most marvelous time," Vivian announced to the camera. Her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. She patted Eleanor's arm. "The Sterlings have been so welcoming to our family. Truly blending our two worlds has been an absolute blessing." Eleanor offered a tight, forced chuckle, stepping slightly away to dislodge my mother's hand. "Yes, well, we are certainly experiencing a lot of new things today," Eleanor said, her tone dripping with quiet condescension. "Your family is incredibly colorful, Vivian. And your husband, the pastor. He is surprisingly articulate. We were just telling Preston how brave he is for embracing such a vibrant, loud culture." David let out a low scoff beside me. I watched the screen in disbelief. The microaggressions were not even micro. They were massive, glaring insults wrapped in polite society vocabulary. They were calling my family loud, unrefined, and completely out of place. Yet Vivian just smiled harder, swallowing the insult like it was fine caviar. She was so desperate to be accepted by these bankrupt aristocrats that she would let them mock her to her face. "Yes, Marcus is very passionate about his sermons," Vivian replied, completely missing the insult. "We are just so blessed that Chloe found a man with such a prestigious pedigree. It is all about class, isn't it?" The camera panned over to capture Preston standing near a towering ice sculpture talking to an older man in a crisp tuxedo. But the conversation did not look friendly. The older man was the head of the luxury catering company my parents had insisted on hiring to impress the Sterlings. He was holding a sleek black payment terminal and shaking his head. "Excuse me just a moment," Chloe told her followers, leaving the live stream running as she walked toward her fiancé. The audio picked up everything with crystal clarity. "I am telling you to run the card again," Preston was saying, his face flushing an angry, blotchy red. "You clearly do not know how to operate the machine. Do you know who I am? I am Preston Sterling. You do not decline a Sterling in their own home." The caterer did not flinch. He had clearly dealt with fake wealth before. Sir, I have run the card 4 times. The terminal is explicitly stating insufficient funds. I also called the merchant line to verify. Your entire account is frozen. We have 60 staff members here tonight, thousands of dollars in imported food, and a strict contract. If you cannot provide a valid form of payment right now, I am legally obligated to pack up the food stations and pull my staff from the floor. A few guests standing nearby stopped talking. The awkward silence began to spread through the ballroom like a virus. Preston looked frantic, patting his pockets as if a spare bundle of cash might magically appear. I do not understand, he stammered, looking at his mother who had hurried over. The trust distributions were supposed to clear yesterday. Vivian saw her golden opportunity. She saw the wealthy Sterling family in a moment of mild embarrassment, and she decided she was going to be the hero. She marched directly into the frame of Chloe's live stream, digging into her own designer purse. Oh, please do not cause a scene over a simple bank error, Vivian announced loudly, ensuring her voice carried across the room and directly into Chloe's microphone. Banks make these silly administrative mistakes all the time. Preston, darling, put your wallet away. We are family now. I will cover the catering balance for the evening. Chloe beamed, picking up the phone to frame her mother perfectly. She read a few of the comments scrolling up the screen and let out a smug laugh. Someone just commented asking where Maya is, Chloe said, rolling her eyes. Mom, do you want to tell them why my sister is not at the event of the season? Vivian pulled out her shiny platinum credit card and held it between her manicured fingers. She looked directly into the camera lens, her eyes hard and triumphant. Let us just say that tonight is about celebrating true class, Vivian declared. When you marry into true prestige, you support each other, you elevate each other. It is not about scraping by in some downtown loft with people who do not understand our standards. At least Chloe knows how to secure a man of genuine wealth and pedigree. Unlike some people who settle for less and act incredibly socially unfit when asked to step up. We only want positive high-class energy here tonight. I watched her hand the platinum card to the caterer. I took a slow sip of my champagne, savoring the absolute perfection of the timing. My mother had just insulted my husband, my life, and my character in front of thousands of people using a credit card that was tied directly to the church accounts my father had leveraged. The caterer swiped the platinum card. The machine beeped a sharp, unyielding electronic tone. He frowned, tapped the screen, and swiped it a second time. The machine beeped again. The caterer looked up, his professional demeanor slipping into outright annoyance. Ma'am, this card is also declining. Vivian let out a sharp, condescending laugh. That is impossible. Do you have any idea what the limit is on that card? Run it again. Try inserting the chip. You are embarrassing yourself in front of my guests. I am not the one who is embarrassed, ma'am, the caterer replied, turning the terminal so she could see the glowing red text on the screen. It says account frozen. Contact financial institution immediately. I am not running it again. If someone cannot produce a working card or a certified check in the next 3 minutes, my team is leaving. Vivian snatched the card back, her face turning the exact shade of Preston's. Marcus, she shrieked, turning toward the marble staircase. Marcus, come here right now. There is something wrong with the bank. The camera jerked wildly as Chloe turned it to find our father. Marcus Jenkins was not looking at the caterer. He was not looking at Vivian. He was staring down at his cellular phone. He had just read the text message I sent to the family group chat. His face was entirely devoid of color. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life burn to the ground. Marcus Vivian snapped, marching over to him. Give this man your corporate card. The bank put a security hold on mine. Marcus slowly looked up from his screen. His hands were shaking so violently that he nearly dropped the phone. The money is gone, Vivian, he whispered, his voice cracking with absolute terror. What are you talking about? Vivian demanded, grabbing his arm. Just pay the caterer. We have church funds we can transfer. The church funds are gone, Marcus shouted, his voice echoing through the grand ballroom, completely shattering the illusion of their high-class gathering. Preston lied to us. The bridge loan failed. Maya just bought the debt. The accounts are frozen because the federal government locked them. We have nothing. Chloe's mouth fell open. The camera angle dropped, pointing toward the marble floor as her hands went weak. In the background of the audio, you could hear Eleanor Sterling gasp and Preston start shouting profanities. The guests were murmuring loudly now, stepping away from my family as if poverty was contagious. Vivian let out a sound that was half shriek, half sob, demanding Marcus explain what he meant by the money being gone. But Marcus did not get a chance to explain. Before he could speak another word, a deafening, piercing wail cut through the heavy oak doors of the mansion. The sound of multiple high-decibel sirens echoed through the grand foyer, completely drowning out the string quartet. Through the massive, uncurtained windows of the ballroom, violent flashes of red and blue police lights began to wash over the peeling gold ceiling and the terrified faces of the guests. The authorities had breached the front gates. Absolute, unmitigated panic erupted on the live stream as the flashing lights painted my family's horrified faces in bright, unforgiving neon. The heavy double doors of the grand foyer did not just open. They were forced apart with a loud, resounding crack that echoed above the panicked murmurs of the elite guests. Through my iPad screen, I watched 4 uniformed sheriff deputies march into the Sterling mansion. Their heavy black boots stomped mud and melted snow straight onto the antique Persian rugs. They moved with absolute, unbothered authority, completely ignoring the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos parting nervously before them. "Turn the music off," the lead deputy commanded. His voice boomed through the cavernous space, carrying perfectly through Chloe's phone microphone. "Turn it off right now." The string quartet abruptly stopped playing mid-note. The sudden silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by the sharp, terrified gasps of the country club elite. I leaned closer to my screen, absolutely captivated. David pulled up a chair beside me on the rooftop, his eyes fixed on the live feed. We watched as Vivian grabbed my father's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. She looked around wildly, desperately, trying to arrange her face into a mask of mild, aristocratic annoyance rather than outright panic. Preston's father, Arthur Sterling, stepped forward. He puffed out his chest, attempting to channel generations of old money superiority. He adjusted his silk bow tie and offered the deputy a tight, condescending smile. "Officers, there must be some sort of mistake," Arthur said, his tone dripping with the kind of arrogance reserved for men who have never faced real consequences. "This is a private engagement party. You are trespassing on the Sterling estate. I demand you leave immediately before I call the police commissioner. We play golf every Sunday." The lead deputy did not even blink. He reached into his leather binder and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents stapled together with a bright blue cover sheet. He held it up so the entire room and the thousands of people currently watching Chloe's live stream could see it clearly. "I am the police commissioner's deputy," Arthur the officer replied coldly. "And I am not trespassing. You are." Arthur's arrogant smile vanished. Eleanor Sterling let out a high-pitched shriek, dropping her crystal champagne flute. It shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound making several guests jump. Preston lunged forward physically, positioning himself between his parents and the officers, but the deputy simply sidestepped him. "I have here a court-ordered writ of possession and a final eviction notice for the entirety of this property," the deputy announced, raising his voice so it bounced off the peeling gold leaf ceiling. "This estate was officially foreclosed upon 30 days ago due to massive unrectified commercial and residential loan defaults. The grace period has expired. You are illegally occupying a property owned by a private equity firm. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate the premises before my officers begin physically removing you and your guests." The ballroom erupted into absolute chaos. Through the screen, I watched wealthy socialites scrambling for the coat check. Women in beaded gowns were literally pushing each other out of the way to reach the front doors. They did not care about Preston. They did not care about the engagement. They only cared about escaping before they were photographed at a rated bankrupt party. The stench of failure was in the air, and high society rats always flee a sinking ship first. Chloe's phone shook violently in her hand. The camera angle tilted wildly, capturing her own feet, then the ceiling, then my mother's horrified face. Vivian was hyperventilating. Her entire worldview, her desperate clawing need to be recognized as elite, was collapsing right in front of her. She looked at Eleanor Sterling, expecting the older woman to fix it, to pull out a black card or make a phone call that would magically wave the police away. But Eleanor was weeping, her face buried in her hands, completely destroyed. Then my father stepped into the frame. Marcus Jenkins could not accept the reality in front of him. His ego would not allow it. He had staked his entire reputation on this marriage. He had bragged to every deacon, every pastor, and every elder in our district that his daughter was marrying into a billionaire dynasty. He had sacrificed his relationship with me, banned his own family from my wedding, all to secure his place at this table. He was not going to let a piece of paper take that away. He puffed out his chest, stepping squarely in front of the sheriff's deputy. He raised his hands, adopting the booming, authoritative voice he used to command his congregation every Sunday morning. "Now hold on just 1 minute," Marcus shouted, pointing a stern finger at the officer. "You are making a colossal, humiliating mistake. You are embarrassing innocent God-fearing people. I know for a fact that this family is entirely solvent. My future son-in-law is a billionaire. I know this because I personally verified his accounts just last week." The deputy raised an eyebrow, looking at my father like he had lost his mind. "Sir, I do not know who you are, but I highly suggest you step back and let us do our jobs." "I am Reverend Marcus Jenkins," my father declared, his chest heaving with misplaced righteous indignation. "And I am telling you, this is a misunderstanding. Preston Sterling is currently executing a massive international business venture. In fact, I just personally authorized and guaranteed a $2 million bridge loan for him using my church's community development and pension fund. A man with access to $2 million of liquid untethered church capital is not getting evicted from his own home." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. David gripped my shoulder tightly. My father had just confessed to wire fraud and embezzlement on a live internet broadcast with thousands of viewers. He was so incredibly arrogant, so deeply entrenched in his worship of white wealth, that he actually thought announcing his financial crimes would somehow validate Preston's status. He thought throwing the church's sacred money around would make the police bow down and apologize. Instead, the deputy's expression hardened into stone. He looked from my father to Preston, then back to my father. "Reverend Jenkins," the deputy said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous low register, "you guaranteed a $2 million loan for this man using a church pension fund." "Yes, I did," Marcus barked proudly, completely oblivious to the trap closing around him. "Because I believe in family, and I believe in supporting elite business endeavors. So you can take your little eviction notice and get off my son-in-law's property." The deputy did not move. He reached into his binder and pulled out a second document, this one stamped with the red seal of the federal court. "Reverend, you have been severely scammed," the deputy replied, his words sharp and unforgiving. "Preston Sterling does not have an international business venture. He has massive, unregulated gambling debts and a string of fraudulent shell companies. The federal government froze every single one of his accounts 3 weeks ago. That $2 million you authorized is completely gone. It was seized to pay off his illegal offshore creditors." My father froze. The booming confidence evaporated from his face, replaced by a hollow, sickening realization. He looked at Preston. Preston could not even meet his eyes. The golden boy, the untouchable heir, was staring at his own expensive leather shoes, sweating profusely. My mother let out a guttural, horrifying scream. $2 million! Vivian shrieked, grabbing my father's lapels and shaking him. "Marcus, what did you do? The church board is going to send you to federal prison. We are going to lose everything." The deputy ignored my mother's breakdown and handed the original eviction notice toward Arthur Sterling. But before Arthur could take it, Chloe launched herself forward. The camera feed jerked wildly as Chloe dropped her phone onto a nearby cocktail table. The lens pointed upward, capturing the scene perfectly from a dramatic low angle. Chloe snatched the legal document right out of the deputy's hand. Her perfectly styled hair was a mess. Her expensive engagement dress was wrinkled. She looked like a madwoman. "This is a lie!" Chloe screamed, waving the paper in the air. "This house belongs to Preston. You cannot just come in here and say some random company bought his entire life. Who even bought this debt? Who are you working for? Show me the name of the private equity firm." The deputy crossed his arms, looking completely exhausted by my family's theatrics. "It is right there on the front page, ma'am. The property, the debt, and all attached commercial assets were legally acquired by MW Holdings. They are the new owners of the estate. We are executing this eviction on their direct orders." Chloe's hands were shaking violently as she flipped the heavy blue cover sheet back. She stared at the bold black ink printed at the top of the legal writ. I watched her eyes scan the page. I watched her read the corporate header. I watched her read the name of the entity that had just single-handedly destroyed her entire fake universe. Then her eyes moved down to the authorized signature line. I saw the exact second her brain processed the information. Her mouth dropped open. Her eyes bulged so wide they looked like they might roll out of her skull. All the color drained from her perfectly contoured face, leaving her looking pale, sick, and completely terrified. She dropped the document onto the floor like it was burning her hands. "Chloe." "What is it?" Vivian demanded, rushing forward to snatch the paper off the marble tiles. "Who is MW Holdings? Who owns this house?" Vivian yanked the paper up and read the signature line aloud. Her voice echoed clearly through the phone's microphone, broadcasting the absolute destruction of her ego to the entire world. Chief Executive Officer Vivian read, her voice suddenly trembling, dropping to a horrified, breathless whisper. "MW Holdings, Maya Washington." My mother looked up, staring directly into the camera lens, as if she could see me watching her from the rooftop across the city. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. The socially unfit daughter she had discarded, the daughter she had banned her family from supporting, the daughter she had mocked just 10 minutes ago for not understanding high-class standards. I was the one who pulled the strings. I was the one who owned the mansion. And I was the one throwing them out onto the street. The name hung in the dead-heavy air of the grand ballroom, echoing through the speaker of Chloe's dropped phone and transmitting live to thousands of viewers. Maya Washington. Vivian repeated the words, her voice a hollow, trembling gasp, as if saying the name aloud would somehow make it less real. She stared blindly at the blue legal cover sheet, her perfectly manicured fingernails visibly shaking. On my iPad screen, I watched the exact moment Julian Sterling's carefully constructed aristocratic mask shattered into a million jagged pieces. The polite, soft-spoken air with the refined posture and the expensive smile vanished. Julian snatched the eviction notice from my mother's hands with such violent force that the paper tore. His eyes darted frantically across the authorized signature line. The realization of his absolute defeat twisted his handsome features into a vicious, ugly snarl. He did not look like a billionaire trust fund baby anymore. He looked like a cornered, desperate animal. "What is this?" Julian roared, turning his wrath entirely onto my father. His voice stripped of its cultured cadence, revealing a harsh, grating tone. "You told me your sister was a nobody. You sat in my study drinking my scotch and told me she was a failed, socially inept consultant working out of a shared office space. How the hell does she have the capital to buy out my entire commercial debt portfolio?" Marcus stood paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. The formidable Reverend Jenkins, a man who commanded thousands from a pulpit every Sunday, was reduced to a trembling, sweating mess in the middle of a foreclosed foyer. "Julian, please," Chloe begged, stepping forward and reaching for his arm. Her voice was shrill, desperate to cling to the fantasy that was dissolving around her. "It is just a mistake. Maya is just playing a trick on us. We can fix this. Tell the officers to leave. We are still getting married, right?" Julian looked down at her hand on his sleeve as if she were a venomous insect. He violently shoved her away, sending Chloe stumbling backward into a towering arrangement of white roses. The vase crashed to the marble floor water, and petals spilling over the expensive tiles. "Get your hands off me, you pathetic idiot!" Julian spat the pure, unadulterated venom in his voice, causing several remaining guests to gasp in horror. "Marry you? Do you honestly think I would ever actually marry into your loud, unrefined circus of a family? Vivian gasped, clutching her chest. Julian, how can you speak to us this way? We are your family. We gave you everything. We pledged the church funds for your business. You gave me exactly what I wanted because you are stupid, Julian yelled, pacing the floor like a caged predator. He threw his arms wide, gesturing to the peeling gold ceiling and the dusty velvet drapes. Look around you, I am completely bankrupt. My family has not had real money in a decade. But you people were so desperate to sit at the white man's table, so hungry to be adjacent to old money, that you did not even bother to check if the table was paid for. He stepped closer to my mother, towering over her, his words dripping with racist, classist contempt. I targeted you because you hate yourselves. I saw you walk into the country club, desperate for validation, trying to talk differently, trying to act like you belonged. You were the easiest, most gullible marks I have ever met. All I had to do was wear a pastel sweater and pretend to like your husband's tedious sermons, and you practically handed me the keys to your congregation's bank accounts. You sold out your own people just to take an engagement photo on my staircase. The brutal, unvarnished truth hit Vivian like a physical blow. Her knees buckled. The woman who had spent my entire life telling me I was feral, that I lacked class, that I was a social liability, because I refused to straighten my hair or shrink my personality for the comfort of the elite, simply collapsed. She hit the wet marble floor, her expensive designer gown pooling around her in the spilled flower water. She looked up at Julian, the white savior she had worshipped and chosen over her own biological daughter, and saw nothing but utter disgust in his eyes. He had played her. He had weaponized her own internalized racism and deep-seated insecurities against her, using her desperate need for high society approval to drain her husband's church funds. And the daughter she had deemed socially unfit, the daughter she had explicitly banned from this very room, was the billionaire holding the deed to the entire estate. On the rooftop across town, David pulled me closer, his arm wrapped securely around my waist, as we watched the carnage unfold on the screen. The comments on Chloe's livestream were moving so fast they were a blur of text. Did he just admit to scamming a church? OMG, the racism jumped out. He is literally broke. Maya is the CEO. Call the FBI. The lead sheriff's deputy, who had been standing silently by the doors, finally stepped forward. He placed a heavy hand on Julian's shoulder. Julian Sterling, you need to step away from these people. Aside from the eviction, my officers are detaining you for questioning regarding federal wire fraud and the illegal transfer of commercial funds. I am not going anywhere with you, Julian screamed, trying to wrench his shoulder away from the officer's grip. Do you know who my family is? The deputy did not hesitate. He swiftly spun Julian around, forcing his arms behind his back, and the sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the ballroom. The remaining high society guests, the ones who had not already fled to the coat check, began frantically rushing for the side exits. Nobody